This is an I Am Listening original podcast.
There are many areas that is important to the people, and this is what my target, and I am confident that we can deliver on what we promised, and I will be going back to the election in 5 years' time after achieving all this.
Welcome to the Kent Politics Podcast, your go-to source for insightful discussions on local and national political matters. Join us as we take a deep dive into local government across the county. Find out what the key decision makers have to say, what your money is being spent on, and how the party's policies could affect how we live. Plus, don't miss our regular feature, Westminster Watch, where we dissect the latest developments and decisions shaping the political landscape in the heart of the UK's capital. Engage with us as we delve into the issues that matter to you and explore the dynamic world of politics from a Kent perspective.
Welcome to this edition of the Kent Politics Podcast. In the week, one council went off its trolley, another is finding a bridge closure too far, and we're finding out what is going on down at the docks. Plus, we'll tear apart the first Labour budget in 15 years and what it means for the people of Kent. My name is Simon Finlay, local democracy reporter covering Kent County Council, and I'm joined by Robert Boddy, who looks after Medway.
Hello.
And Daniel Esson, who covers the district and borough councils.
Hi.
And senior news editor Nikki White, who's been casting an eye over what Rachel Reeves had to say this week.
Hello.
Later on, we'll be joined by our special guest, the new Labour MP for Ashford, who dislodged Conservative Damien Green after 27 years in Parliament. Robert, what's been happening down in Medway?
Well, first of all, I'd like to speak about Chatham Docks. We last spoke about the docks way back in May when Medway Council Planning Committee approved Peel Water's plans to create a business park on the Chatham Docks industrial estate. Then MP for Rochester and Shoe Kelly Tolhurst wrote to the then Secretary for Levelling Up, Michael Gove, asking for him to consider calling in the decision. While he was deciding, nothing could progress with the application. Then, as some may recall, an election occurred and the Tories were booted out of office.
So what happens now then?
Well, so following the election, the decision was then given to Angela Rayner, now Secretary of State for the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, who has finally made a decision not to intervene, meaning the original decision by Medway Council's Planning Committee still stands. In a letter to the council, she says she sees no reason to intervene and the decision can stay within the authority.
And what's the reaction been?
So, disappointment mostly. Peel Waters was obviously pleased, but say they're waiting until Medway Council have officially confirmed the progression of the application. Meanwhile, that former MP, Kelly Tolhurst, said it's been disappointing. She's surprised it wasn't called in, and she says Labour are going back on election promises to, firstly, nationally to generate growth, as she says this will result in a loss of jobs, as well as locally from Medway Labour's promise to protect the docks. The current MP for Rochester and Stroud, Lauren Edwards, says she knows that many residents will be disappointed, and she supported the request for a call-in. She says she's met with businesses at the docks to find the best route forward for them, and will also meet with Peel to make sure the site meets those promises of jobs which they have made. Medway Council says it has been confirmed that the decision made at the meeting in May was the legally compliant and correct one.
So I take it that's the final word in the matter?
Not quite. Both Tolhurst and Phil Taylor, former chief executive of ArcelorMittal Kent Wire, who's long been opponent of the redevelopment of the docks, says they will fight on and on. Mr. Taylor wouldn't tell me what his strategy would be, but he did say he would not make the local plan process, which is coming up for the council, very easy.
Dan Esson, what have you been looking at?
I've been looking at trolleys, as it happens.
Oh, really?
They've been all the rage in Canterbury City Council this week, where councillors have voted to look at forcing supermarkets to pay higher fines when their trolleys get abducted and abandoned elsewhere in the city.
Well, why is that on the agenda?
So Canterbury isn't special in this regard. I think it's pretty normal for anywhere with big shops. But you do seem to find shopping trolleys pretty much here, there and everywhere within a few miles of supermarkets, of which Canterbury has quite a few. In particular, though, Canterbury has the River Stour that runs through it, and it's not unusual for volunteers to fish decrepit trolleys out of that pretty frequently. So Councillor Alistair Brady put a motion to the council last week calling them the scourge of the city and asking the cabinet to look at ramping up the fines that they make shops cough up for their rogue trolleys.
Well, presumably they already issue fines for them, don't they?
Yeah, they do. They're not crazy steep, but they're reasonable. So last year the council actually made 14 grand from fining supermarkets for collecting their trolleys. Basically what happens, if a trolley is found and reported to the council, they take it away to the depot, the Canenco depot where the bin lorries operate from. If the supermarket collect it within 6 weeks, it only sets them about £82 and the supermarket has to pay 82 quid to the council. If they take it away, if it takes them any longer to collect it and it's sat with the council for more than 6 weeks, the council destroys it, or whatever that means, and charges 146 quid. The motion didn't call for any particular new prices, but Councillor Brady praised and cited Cheltenham Borough Council, where they charge £50 to a supermarket upon finding a trolley, another £5 for every day that they're kept in storage, and a 310 quid disposal fee after 42 days in storage.
Are the councillors in favour of this?
Oh yeah, absolutely. As are all the volunteers who regularly put waders on to go digging about the Stour to fish out all manner of stuff from the river, including trolleys. The motion passed Canterbury City Council unanimously, and the Cabinet confirmed they didn't commit to any specific prices, but they confirmed they were already considering hiking up these charges in their budget for the coming year. The supermarkets tell me, as you would imagine, that they take this all very seriously. They want the public to report abandoned trolleys, but it looks like next year could get a bit pricier for them unless they keep a much more watchful eye on their fleet of shopping cars.
So what's happening down your way, Simon?
Well, last week it was potholes again. This week it's bridges, broken bridges. My colleague Gabriel Morris, who was with us last week, and I went to see ourselves the problems being caused by the closure of a single track at Teeston Bridge.
So what's happened to it?
Well, as it seems to happen with increasing regularity these days, someone drove into the side of it and took a big chunk off the side of it. It's on the Farley side, not the Teeston Country Park side, and it caused a large section to fall onto the bank below, including a damaged parapet. Because this bridge is used by, and this is an estimate, that the KCC doesn't actually have any figures for it, an estimated 30,000 cars every month. It's putting pressure on the other bridges in the area, two of which are also due to shut temporarily fairly shortly. And some folk are saying that school runs are taking 2 hours instead of 20 minutes, and that roadworks in places like Dean Street are just making things worse, and of course dumping all those extra cars onto the other bridges at East Farley and Wattingbury, which are already pretty overstretched.
And what are local people saying?
Well, it's just another reflection on the state of the roads. Too many cars and too few roads to deal with them. One woman that we spoke to suggested that another bridge should be built to cope with the traffic, but she couldn't really think where it would go, and nor could we. So, but I'm sure there are clever people who could think of something. But some people said the Teeston Bridge works okay when it's open, but when it's shut, it brings havoc to everybody else. And that and the other constant closures somewhere along the network, road closures for utilities or traffic lights or whatever, and then making Kent's roads a bit of a challenge. No one argued that the work wasn't to be done, because otherwise it won't reopen, but it also takes time to recondition the stones that have fallen off and to use the correct type of lime mortar, so people using Teeston Bridge will just have to wait a bit longer. Nikki, what caught your eye in the world of Westminster this week?
OK, well, many people will remember education being at the heart of Tony Blair's pitch to the British public in the run-up to the 1997 general election. For Chancellor Rachel Reeves, her first budget had the key message of invest, invest, invest. So since Labour came to power, we've been left under no illusion that the next few years are going to be tough to come anywhere near to fixing that £22 billion black hole in the public finances that Labour say the Tories have left us with. So while we knew this wasn't going to be a time to celebrate, it was how Rachel Reeves delivered that message. It was always going to be the important thing. So her message was that if anything is going to cost us more, and it will, it was all going to go into investment, and that would rebuild Britain once again. So the UK's first female Chancellor promised to put more pounds in people's pockets. And while that's welcome news to most of us, that she won't be increasing income tax or national insurance on employees, it does mean that the companies themselves will be shouldering more of a financial hit with higher national insurance contributions from employers. She talked about an economy that's growing, creating wealth and opportunity for all, saying it was the only way that we could improve living standards. She also confirmed there's going to be more funding for the NHS, which is going to be great news for all of us. And that includes £1.5 billion for new surgical hubs and scanners, and £70 million for radiotherapy machines. There'll be £1.4 billion to rebuild more than 500 schools. There's going to be investment in free breakfast clubs. That's going to triple. And there's going to be £1.8 billion to expand government-funded childcare, and 44 million to support foster carers, which is good news too. She confirmed that VAT, however, will be introduced on private schools from January. There's going to be £240 million ploughed into local services, and that's going to be spent on helping people get back into work and trying to get around as well. We know that there's the £2 cap on bus fares at the moment. That is going to go up to £3, but is still going to stay at a cap, and that's going to be for another year. To pay for all this, she confirmed that taxes will rise, but she won't be raising income tax, VAT or employees' national insurance. It will be those contributions from the employers. Good news, fuel duty is frozen for another year, and pensions are set to increase, with 12 million pensioners gaining up to £470 next year, and that's up £275 more than if it had been uprated by inflation. And the biggest cheer, probably the biggest cheer of the afternoon, was the beer drinkers. It's going to be the cut to draft beer. There's going to be a penny off a pint in the pub, so that's another penny in your pocket, which is good news. There's going to be a 6.7% increase in the national living wage, and that's going to see wages rise to £12.21 an hour next year, and that's going to be worth up to £1,400 a year to a full-time worker. There's also going to be changes to the carers allowance, and that's going to put more money in their pockets too. It wasn't all rosy though. The government was reprimanded by Madam Deputy Speaker, because obviously everything that I've said, you pretty much knew all of it. A lot of it had been leaked beforehand, and the government was reprimanded for that and told that they ought to be declaring this kind of news in the House beforehand, and they've been given a strict warning not to do it again. As you can imagine, the Kent Labour MPs were pretty impressed by it all. And we had Sittingbourne and Sheppey MP Kevin McKenna. He said, "I'm so proud of our budget. This government chooses to protect working people every single time. To repair the foundations of Britain, working people will be better off under Labour." So we'll wait to see if that happens.
Well, he would say that, wouldn't he? Listen, we'll come back to the budget a little bit later on, Nikki, so thank you for that.
Is there a topic that you would like to be discussed on the Kent Politics podcast? Perhaps you've got a question for one of our panel, or you'd like to comment on a hot topic in local or national government. Get in touch by emailing or sending a voice note to kentpoliticspodcast@thekmgroup.co.uk.
At the July general election, Labour's Sojan Joseph unseated Damien Green, Ashford's Conservative MP of 27 years, to deliver one of the big shocks of the night. More than 2 decades ago, he swapped his native Kerala in India for Kent, landing a seat in Parliament after only a year in politics. A remarkable journey indeed, and he joins us today. Welcome, Sojan.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. Lovely to have you. It's hard to believe that there has been no non-Conservative MP representing Ashford for about 140 years. So how much of your victory was down to the presence of Reform UK, do you think?
Reform UK had some influence in splitting the wards, I think, but it's also the people of Ashford was looking for a change, and my presence in Ashford for the last 22 years has helped me. People know me as a local politician and also as a worker in the NHS, so they chose me. Yes, definitely Reform had some influence.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Damien Green had been there since 1997. He got a seat at a time when everybody in the Conservative Party seemed to be losing theirs. So there was a slight irony about that. But let's just sort of spin back to the start. You were born in Kerala, or in India, southern India, 49 years ago, and you came to England in 2001. Just tell us a little about that journey. Why did you decide, sort of relatively late in life, to suddenly make a change?
Yeah, so I was born in India, Kerala, the southern state, India. I studied in India and completed my primary education, and I was qualified as a nurse. And back in 2000, the NHS, the UK, has so many nurses been brought into here to work in the NHS and in the care sector. So I followed that, and I came to UK. So we had to do some trainings initially and to register with the NMC, and I moved into Ashford and started working in adult unit. That was based, the mental health unit based in the William Harvey Hospital.
Yeah. So, how did you find the change? I mean, there's a huge difference between southern India and South Kent. What did you make of it all when you got here?
It was a big change, leaving my family behind, moving into a new country was a big change. But, it was easily adaptable. As a nurse, you care for people, and that's the only job I have done. So it was not a huge challenge in terms of getting used to the work. But it was more about the culture. It was a big change, but it was easily adaptable for me.
You're a nurse by trade, but I mean that you've gone up the ranks fairly steadily over that time. First as a staff nurse, and as a matron or the equivalent, service manager, and sort of laterally towards the end of your NHS career before you went into Westminster, you were sort of head of nursing in the mental health field. I mean, mental health is a huge issue these days. I mean, why did you choose to specialise in that? You're
right. So mental health. I was qualified as a mental health nurse, and I worked in mental health ever since I came to this country. That was my passion, and I really enjoy helping people. And when you see people recover after going through a lot of difficulties, it's a huge satisfaction for me, and I enjoy that, helping people and wider community and family. You're right. So I started as a registered nurse, staff nurse, and then I became a deputy ward manager and a ward manager, matron, service manager, and I was a head of nursing. So I worked across the Kent, even though I started in Ashford. I was in St Martin's Hospital, Canterbury. I worked in Maidstone. This is all one NHS trust cover the mental health service across the Kent.
Yeah.
And I briefly worked in the forensic mental health unit in Maidstone as a service manager before I came back to East Kent as the head of nursing, and I worked till 4th of July.
Just for the benefit of the listeners, I mean, when you use the word forensic, can you just explain what forensic means to the listeners?
So basically, the people who involved in some criminal activities, and that is due to their mental illness, the court decide that this person committed some crime due to their mental illness and need to be treated in a hospital settings rather than in a prison setting. So they are brought into the hospital settings.
That's a very difficult and very specialised form of nursing care, because it throws up all sorts of challenges.
It does, and we need more resources. Yes, it is a very specialised area.
You've worked at the sharp end of the NHS for more than 20 years, as you've just been outlining, but how much of that experience in the NHS informed your choice of political paths? I mean, was that the reason for choosing the Labour Party?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right, and I really enjoyed working in the NHS. And when I was back in, I think it was in 2000, yes, it was 2015, when I was a ward manager in St Martin's Hospital, Canterbury. Every day you meet patients and families. So we were really struggling at that point. We couldn't find bed for mental health patients. People were waiting for weeks and weeks when they're going through the most challenging time. And I don't know if you remember, we used to find bed for Kent patients in Manchester and Birmingham and places like that. So the NHS was going down. We were struggling to recruit nurses because it was no longer an attractive profession for people. And this all started when the Conservative government brought in the austerity and cutting budget for the NHS. So I decided that, you as a ward manager had a limited influence on how the services are provided. And I thought I need to raise this where the decisions are made. And that's how I ended up joining the politics. And so I know you mentioned very new in politics, but I joined the Labour Party in 2015. Even though I was not quite active till 2020.
With the party at the time, 2015, was led by Jeremy Corbyn, I believe. Was that your sort of brand of Labour politics? Would you be at that end of the spectrum as opposed to Sir Keir Starmer?
Not really. I mean, the reason to join the Labour Party was that was the main opposition party at that time. I do believe in socialistic ideology, and I thought as a worker, as a frontline NHS worker, and that was the choice of my party.
You were elected after only 1 year on Ashford Borough Council to the Aylesford and East Stour ward, which is a remarkable achievement to be elected that soon in politics. Some local councillors try for years and fail. So did you think when you embarked out on that journey to take on Damien Green with the majority of, I don't know, tens of thousands, that you thought that you could actually win it?
So, yeah, I was a councillor for a year, but I was involved in various community activities before that. As someone who came from India, and I was involved in the local community groups, local church. I was involved in various charity events. I don't know if you know, I used to run marathons. I have completed 9 full marathons and raised a lot of money for various charities. So when I was chosen as the candidate, initially I thought maybe it's a difficult task. Obviously, we were not a targeted seat. Ashford was not a targeted seat. However, halfway through the campaign, when I was knocking to doors and talking to people, I thought people were looking for a change. Initially, I thought it was not possible, but I was working hard, and we did it.
There are quite a few. I mean, Labour's got 11 MPs in Kent, which 4 years ago would have been thought just virtually impossible. But you're sitting on a very thin majority of, I think, 1,779. That's going to be a real target seat for probably Reform and the Conservatives and possibly the Lib Dems next time. What areas of work, what issues in the community will you be focusing on in order to make sure that your public profile is high and that you can achieve things that will sort of make you stand out in people's minds when it comes to 2029? My majority is very narrow majority, and I can go back to the electorate in 5 years' time is by delivering what we promised. So, specific to Ashford, there are many things in my priority to achieve in the next 5 years. People really struggling to get a GP appointments. As you probably heard many times, the A&E in Ashford is overcrowded. People are waiting hours and hours to get to see a doctor. Ambulances not arriving in time. So the NHS is one of the priority. I mean, economic stability, again, people's standard of living has gone down. Again, that's something the Labour is trying to achieve, an economic stability. The roads, the state of the roads in Ashford, I mean, is in a very bad state. That needs to be improved. Or to bring the international travel back to Ashford. That's another target. Rejuvenate the high street, bring more businesses to Ashford, more housing, more affordable housing, social housing, the schools, we need more teachers, antisocial behaviours in Ashford. We need more police presence. So there are many areas that is important to the people, and this is what my target, and I am confident that we can deliver on what we promised, and I will be going back to the election in 5 years' time after achieving all this. You mentioned international travel. Eurostar is not stopping at Ashford. Why is that proving so difficult to get back?
Well, as you and everyone know, we had a 40% stake in the Eurostar, and the government in 2015 decided to take the money out. And when they decided to stop the service in 2020, we had no say in it. So there's been lots of work done by the local council, the KCC, over the past 4 years to bring the Eurostar back. It is not their choice at the moment to come back to Ashford because they said it's not economically viable. So it is one of my targets. I will be working hard to bring that international travel back to Ashford.
You also mentioned the roads, and the roads are state of the roads, and arguably Ashford's actually got a slightly better road system because it took the time and trouble to build some roads before it started slotting in, thousands and thousands of houses. Why do you think Kent has been targeted for so much development? As you know, the road maintenance sits with the local council, and the funding to the local councils has been going down for some time. I think maybe they would need more funding, or
whether the fund has been used appropriately. So that needs to be looked into. I mean, I recently returned to the Department of Transport about improving the roads in Ashford, and also I have written to the portfolio holder in the Kent County Council. There's a lot of work needs to be done in that area.
Just to rewind back to you, you've only been in Parliament for a few months. How did you find the change between working in the NHS and the health service to suddenly working at Westminster? Had you had much experience of Westminster before that?
Interesting question. No, I haven't had any experience in Westminster. So working in the NHS, as I touched on earlier, is working under pressure, constantly working under pressure, and you always want to do the best for the people. So I think that experience has helped me. 3 months. I mean, it was hard initially, a lot of things to learn, and a lot of things to be done on your own. Looking back 3 months, and I feel proud that I have managed to get my own team now, and I've got the offices open, and I started to run regular surgeries, able to meet businesses, individuals, and started to focus on some of the priorities, as I mentioned earlier. So it was quite busy, but things are started to settle down.
You're married with 3 children, 2 of whom are at university. How do you like to relax? I believe it's marathon running, isn't it?
Well, the marathon running helped me in the past, but I no longer run marathon. I managed to run 9. I used to go to the gym and do some small, short runs, but it has affected since I moved into Westminster. But slowly getting back into routine now. So physical exercise helped me to manage the stress, help me fit, and stay in focus what I want to achieve.
Sojan Joseph, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you today, and thank you very much indeed for your time. Rachel Reeves, the Labour Chancellor, delivered the first budget in many a long year, designed to rake in an extra £40 billion in taxes. But what would the people in Kent make of it? Nicky, you've been following this pretty closely. What was the sort of immediate local reaction?
I think from most people, it's just not been a surprise. As we mentioned previously, a lot of this had been announced beforehand, probably just trying to, people are forewarned. Forewarned is forearmed. It's kind of that announcement, when you're stuck on a train and you don't know why the train isn't going anywhere, but the minute that you know why, you just immediately become less angry. So the fact that we all knew that we were going to have to start tightening our purses and, really making some cuts somewhere and suffering a little in our pocket. If that was drip fed beforehand, we were probably going to cope with it better than it all being announced today. I think the penny off a pint, it's not going to really make a big difference if you go into the pub, if you've got to buy an awful lot of beer to make a significant saving. But it's a good headline. People will remember that, and that's a saving for them and will make people feel better. And it got
a big cheer in the House as well, didn't it?
Massive cheer, yes, absolutely.
Okay. I mean, it wasn't a budget necessarily that hammered people. It was probably, if anything, it hammered businesses more, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it'd be interesting to see how that is going to affect people widespread. I mean, businesses are going to have to take a hit, and how they pass that on either to their employees or to their customers. That's going to be where we're really going to feel the pinch. But, generally, they picked all the headlines that you might expect them to. There's going to be more funding for the NHS, and that's going to get overhauled. More money for roads in terms of there's going to be the magic word of potholes that we all dread. There's more money coming into that. We know that we've got to make cuts, but they were making the cuts in what felt like the right places right now.
Apart from the stuff that had already been leaked, I mean, there was the announcement of a COVID corruption commissioner. That'll be an interesting one. And a new office for the value for money. So I don't know what that means. And there'll be a 2% productivity savings target for government departments. So they're probably going to have to start sort of counting their staples and measuring up for new seating arrangements. But let's just talk about, we're all local political journalists in the room. And I suppose the one thing that the people that we write about, were looking about for, was something about local government. And, and there was nothing apart from the fact that there's going to be more money for the Labour mayors at Manchester and West Midlands, Andy Burnham and Richard Parker. I couldn't see an awful lot, really, that was of much substance.
No, I mean, there wasn't anything specifically about local government in there, as far as I could tell, other than councils being able to keep the capital receipts from the sale of social homes to reinvest into housing, which is decent. Many local councils have been crying out for this for a long time, but it doesn't really say anything good that something as meagre as that is considered to be progress. That's willing to create the Office of Value for Money at Quango to supervise other Quangos, and they also brought a 2% cut across all government departments, which presumably the Ministry of Communities, Housing and Local Government is now known will not be exempt. And it's something that I found interesting about the budget is that in the things they've tried to minimise cuts which will actually and extra expense to normal people, which normal people will actually notice. But two major things which normal people actually notice is that 1 million people will end up paying significantly more for their regular bus journeys through the £1 increase, which obviously over a long period of time, if you use buses a lot, will end up costing you quite a bit. And also, local government is what deals with your local services. The diminished local government funding is why your high street looks rubbish, is why the road is full of potholes, and why, everything about sort of small town Britain feels shabby and crumbling. And if they wanted to, ignoring the economics of it, if you wanted something to be pointed out as a political success that normal people would perceive in their day-to-day lives, massive injection of funding for local government would be ideal. So I don't think anyone in local government is going to be rejoicing today's budget.
Oh yeah, it was interesting that Rachel Reeves chose to single out, £1 billion extra for special educational needs. Like £1 billion sounds like a lot of money, but I mean, Kent County Council, given the state it's in and the demands placed on it, would probably spend that in about half an hour. So it really is a drop in the ocean, isn't it? And what about the £5 billion investment in house building? 3.1 billion of which will be put towards affordable housing.
Well, I mean, obviously, it sounds good on the surface of it, and the question is whether that is successful will depend on the extent to which their other policy goal of planning reform is successul. As exemplified by the Lower Thames crossing, planning, just the paperwork of it, is prohibitively expensive for anyone who wants to get involved in it, even for very large developers. So, if you can get £5 billion worth of new homes in the country in the next 5 years, that'd be very impressive. But it will depend on them, one way or another, they'll have to make a political choice, which is that in many circumstances, they will have to change planning rules, and in many circumstances, they will simply have to force through development in the face of local opposition. They've still not, other than a couple examples like big green energy projects that Ed Miliband has approved, they not yet proven they have the political will to make decisions that unpopular or that controversial in the pursuit of their goals. And
then there was the 500 million extra for road maintenance, i.e. the 1 million extra potholes are going to be fixed across the country. That sounds a lot. These are big numbers, but spread across quite a few authorities, that doesn't really come to a great deal, does it?
There's a lot of potholes that need fixing, and I don't think that's going to come close.
Yeah. Well, I think Kent County Council, in fairness, they did a fair job during the summertime. But the trouble is, as soon as they finish fixing them, the bad weather comes back again, and they all reopen. So I think there's a lot of discussion about the kind of technology that's used for potholes, and perhaps that is something that they can bid for. Rob, was anything that sort of particularly caught your eye in the budget?
Well, I thought one thing that's quite interesting about the budget announcement was, as we say, a lot of things have been pre-announced and leaked and these sorts of things. But I think the budget can kind of operate on lots of levels in the terms of, it wasn't a doom and gloom budget, I didn't particularly think, but there are lots of cuts and the spending increases aren't as great as maybe people had hoped in certain areas and things like that. So there are sort of negatives, particularly, I mean, the first headline that came up sort of as an alert on my phone was that £40 billion tax rises. Yeah. So I think it's very interestingly playing this game of, we're in a difficult position, taxes need to rise. So you've got that headline of £40 billion of tax rises are coming. But then at the same time, you've got positive things like the penny off the pint that we've mentioned. Abolishing the nom-dom tax status is another one which gets a lot of talk online and that sort of thing. So I think they've managed it quite well in the sense of there are headlines that are very positive around this budget that will sort of neutralise other elements, and they can say, look, we're in this difficult position, we're doing what needs to be done, we are raising taxes, we're raising £40 billion of it, but we've made the decisions to sort of help working people is the phrase that they're constantly using. So I think it's very cannily done in terms of managing sort of the media, how they will interpret this, and how the average person who doesn't really know the difference between one tax and another, and what does capital gains tax, am I going to be paying that? What does they know that a pint's going to be cheaper, they know that non-doms are going to start paying tax, and they know that they're not. So I think they've done it quite well in that sense of really sort of managing the narrative of the budget. Whether it will pay off, and in 5 years we'll see that the country's in a better position. That's another thing. But I think they've done it interestingly.
It's interesting you should say that you start off with the big headline, but actually the first bits that were mentioned were the fact that there's going to be £11.8 billion for the infected blood scandal. You got £1.8 billion set aside for the Post Office Horizon scandal, and then we had some fairly encouraging inflation figures over the next 5 years, and similarly with growth. So it was, as you say, it was quite a canny little mixture of good news, bombshell, good news, and like that. And from that point of view, it's there are a lot of people who are going to get hit, but I think the people who will be most worried will be small to medium-sized businesses, because although there was a sort of a little bit of a rollback on, I think, employer allowances and things like that.
But again, I think that's sort of a thing, that's a policy that if you're a small business, small, medium-sized business, you'll have paid attention to that. But if you're your average man in the street who's, just works in the shop around the corner or wherever, that won't really be very relevant to you.
Yeah, I think that it may wash through several months, maybe longer down the line, when businesses were maybe sort of like operating at the edge as it is, start having to lay people off. But it's not going to be a lot of people. They're not going to lay a lot of people off, and they're kind of banking on that. And in that way, I suppose that compared to the winter fuel allowance changes, I mean, this is probably going to be reported on in probably a more reflective and fairer way, I would imagine. Okay, folks, that's your lot for this week. Thanks to Nikki, Rob and Dan, and to our special guest, Sojan Joseph, the new Ashford Labour MP. Don't forget to keep an eye on kentonline.com/politics for the latest news from across the county. You can also sign up for our newly launched politics briefing newsletter by visiting kentonline.co.uk/newsletters/. And finally, don't miss KMTV's politics show every Friday at 5 p.m. All the best. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Kent Politics Podcast. Don't forget to check out stories throughout the week on the politics page of Kent Online. And you can watch the Kent Politics Show with Rob Bailey on KMTV every Friday at 5 p.m. or on demand at kmtv.co.uk.
This has been an I Am Listening original podcast. For more information, head over to our website, im-listening.co.uk.